this video, we're going to talk about non-traditional algorithms for addition. All right, we're going to go over 4 different non-traditional algorithms for addition: adding by place value, decomposing, give and take, and compensating. Let's start with adding by place value. All right, for this problem, we are going to do 137 plus 246. And I'm going to write that with just different colors for each place value. That might make it more visually easy to understand. So when I add by place value, I'm going to do exactly that. I am going to add each value based on the place value that it is in. I'm going to think about that as 100 plus 200. It is as if I am breaking apart these numbers into their expanded notation. So that would look like 100 plus 30 plus 7, and 200 plus 40 plus 6. And this allows students to continue to think about conceptually this idea of what it means to add multi-digit numbers. And students can do this from right to left, just like the traditional algorithm. But the nice thing about this algorithm is that you can also do it from left to right. And this can be a little more intuitive to children because we read left to right. So we're going to add this in this example from left to right, but you could do it right to left as well. So we're going to start with the left place value, which is the hundreds place, and I'm going to add 100 plus 200. That gives me 300. Then I'm going to go to the next place value, that's the tens place, and so we're going to think about this 3 in the tens place as 30, and the 4 in the tens place as 40. So we're going to add 30 plus 40 is 70. And then finally we'll go to the ones place. 7 plus 6 is 13. And so now we can add up each of these smaller problems that we've done, so that we have 300 plus 70 plus 13. And this is a little easier for students to add because we have these zeros, and it's always easier to add with zeros. And our final solution is 383. All right, so that's adding by place value. Let's try decomposing. For decomposing, we are going to do the problem 284 plus 167. So let's start with 284. And I'm going to add to that by decomposing the amount that I need to add, which is 167. I'm going to decompose it. And what that means is I'm going to break it up into smaller parts. Okay. I'm going to start in the ones place just because that feels natural to me. You could start in the hundreds place. It does not matter. You have a lot of autonomy when it comes to using any of these strategies. So I'm going to start in the ones place, and I'm going to decompose 7 into a smaller amount, an amount that makes sense. And so what I'm looking for is adding in my ones place. I have 4 ones now. Well, it would be really easy for me to get to 5 in my ones place, or 0 if I can, because that makes it a lot easier to add with. I'm going to go ahead, and since I have the amount of 7, I can get this to a 0 in the ones place by adding 6 more to it. So I'm going to break my 7 up into 6 and 1. And then I'm going to add 6 to 284. And that will give me 290. Okay, so now we're at a nice even amount, easier to add with. I have already added 6 out of my 167, so I'm going to cross that out just so I can keep track of it. I'm going to save that one for later because I really don't want to have any values in my ones place. It's easier to add with those zeros, so I'm just gonna wait and add that on at the end. So now I have the amount of 161 still left to add up. And I'm gonna go ahead and go to my tens place. And I'm gonna break up my tens. Again, I wanna get this to zeros, and so it's easier to add with. So I'm gonna break my 6 up into 10 and 50, right? I'm decomposing that amount. So when I add 290 plus 10, I'm gonna get to 300. So now I'm at 300. I've added 6 and I've added 10. That means I've added 16 altogether. So I have 151 still left to add. So I'm going to add 300, 100, and get to 400. So we can add 400 plus 51 equals 451. So really all I'm doing, I'm breaking it up into easier chunks so I can add it in something that makes maybe a little more sense for me to do that with. All right, so this time we're gonna do the same problem. We're gonna use decomposing, but we're going to do this on a number line instead. Again, this is just to hopefully see another visual of how this could look to use decomposing. We're gonna say that we're starting here at 284. And I'm gonna do the same thing where I decompose my 7 into 6 and 1, right? So that when I add 6, is 290. And then, again, it's gonna make sense for me to break up so that I get to something easy to work with. 10 more to get to 300. So I broke that into 10 and 50. I can go ahead and do that other jump of 50 if I want, which should take me a little bit more than the 10 did. That will get me to 350. So I've added my 10, my 50, my 6. I'm gonna go ahead and add the 100. $450, and then I'm gonna come back to the 1 plus 1, right? So we can decompose, we can add in any order that we like, but the idea is that we are adding, we're breaking up that 167 into pieces that are just easier to work with. All right, this time we're going to talk about give and take. And we're going to use the problem 362 plus 458. As I've mentioned, adding with zeros is easier, and so we're going to make tens. I'm going to take this 2 from over here, and I'm going to give it to this 8 over here with 458, okay? So that I end up with, if I do the math, I end up with 360 plus 460. We could probably give and take when it comes to working with the tens as well, right? If I take 40 from here and I give it to the 460 over here, right? I end up with 320 plus 500. 320 plus 500 is 820, and it's easier to add because I have these zeros. All right, finally we're going to look at compensating. So we're going to do a problem that's going to make sense to use compensating for. 497 plus 125. When I compensate, that means that I'm going to change the problem. I'm going to make it a different problem, an easier problem, And then I'm going to compensate for how I've changed that problem. So in this case, to add these numbers together, it would be a lot easier if this 497 was actually 500. Again, so now the problem 500 plus 125, much easier for us to do and think about. 500 plus 100 is 600, and then we have the 25. What I did is I added 3 to this amount, and so I need to compensate for that. I need to now take that 3 away because I added too much. So now I need to take away that 3. And I end up with 622. Let's say we were doing the problem 502 plus 125. I can still use compensating in the same way, except this time I'm going to be subtracting 2. So if I want to make this 500 plus 125, right, I still get 625 with that, but this time when I compensated, I went down 2. I subtracted 2, okay? So because I didn't do the actual problem starting at 502, I need to compensate for that. And this time, I would be adding 2 more, right? So that I would get to 627. So as I mentioned, this is very similar to give and take because we're changing the problem, except when we compensate, we change the problem we compensate for how we change the problem at the end. Whereas give and take, we did that as we were working. All right, so these are the 4 problems that we just did: adding by place value, decomposing, give and take, and compensate. And as I mentioned, I put these together because they're similar, right? They're similar but different. Adding by place value and decomposing, they're similar in that we're chunking the number. We're adding up that number by chunks. For adding by place values, those chunks are based on the place values. For decomposing, we have a little more autonomy in how we're chunking or breaking up that number, okay? Give and take and compensating, as I mentioned, they're similar as well, right? Give and take, we are changing the problem. We're taking away this 2 and adding it to the 8, and then and then adding up maybe a little bit easier of a problem. Whereas compensating, we change the number from the get-go, and then we have to compensate from that change at the end. All 4 of these strategies can be used whenever, right? We use them as we need them. It really made sense for me to use compensating here because this 497 is so close to 500. It's so much easier for me to just make it 500 and then add up the 125 and change that. It may not have made sense with 362, right? I may not have wanted to use compensating if that was my starting point, because then I have to compensate a lot. If I change that to 400, right? That's a lot that I'm needing to compensate and keep in my head. Similarly, with give and take, this strategy worked with this problem because 8 and 2 make 10. It was easy to see how to make a 10 or how to make 100 out of that. And so the idea is that we use a strategy that makes the most sense in each situation, okay? So it shouldn't be that you have to use this strategy for this problem. It should be the one that is easiest and makes the most sense for your students or for yourself. And then finally, you can combine these, right? You don't have to only do adding by place value when you're starting with that strategy. You could add by place value, but you could also do some give and take, okay? So you can combine them and work with them however you want. The idea is that you're able to understand number sense and play with those numbers in a way that makes sense for you. All right, if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.